minicamp has started for the New Orleans Saints, and that means Alvin Kamara's back. That means Marshon Lattimore's back, and we got a ton to talk about right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu, and as always, we're brought to you by Scott Fickner Injury Lawyers. If you've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore, Scott Fickner handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. That's right, a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. We're also brought to you by Crystal here on this Tuesday night. Like I said, guys, mandatory minicamp has begun. So much to get through. So make sure if you guys are listening, if you guys do enjoy any content that we put out here on Boo Crew Media, make sure to smash the like button and also subscribe and hit the notification bell. We greatly appreciate it here at Boo Crew Media. So let's just jump right into it. Marshon Lattimore, his name has been mentioned in a plethora of trade rumors, and there's really been no stopping that train this offseason, right? Will he stay? Will he go? What's the latest with him and Dennis Allen? Well, he finally got to the bottom of it today. So Marshon Lattimore shows up to minicamp, which is not really a huge surprise. That was reported, and we talked about it yesterday after New Orleans Football was the first to mention that he is in New Orleans, ready for the start of minicamp. Lattimore spoke to the media today, and he had a lot to talk about. We have some of the video here at Boo Crew Media. If you guys want to check it out on the YouTube page, Lala got some great content, whether it's photos, videos for you guys to check out. So make sure you do that and give her your support. So let's get into the quotes here from Lattimore. When asked about the trade speculation, he said, "We had a situation, a personal situation that we worked through, but it wasn't like I wanted to leave or he wanted me to leave. Nothing like that," Lattimore said when asked about Dennis Allen. "I don't know how y'all looked at it, but it was just a situation that happened personally. It wasn't nothing like that. I told him I didn't want to leave now." Look, I think for Lattimore, first off, let me say this. It's very easy for a star player to be in a situation like this and handle it in the worst way possible. Cryptic tweets, going on some type of Instagram live rant, ignoring the team's phone calls. Lattimore did nothing of that. And again, this is not for me to pat a pro on the back for doing their job, because again, they have a job to do and I get that. But I do want to just throw it out there that I appreciate, though, as a fan, that Marshon Lattimore didn't do any of this nonsense. And yeah, he stayed away from the team for OTAs, which is something he always does, even when there wasn't trade speculation. And when it's time to show up for mandatory minicamp, he's in the building. And he knows he's going to face questions about trade speculation, about his relationship with Dennis Allen, about whether or not he wants to be with the Saints. And he answered it all. So I want to give him credit for that. I think that, it really does speak volumes about the type of pro he is and that he means business. So, for him, I want to give him credit. Now, what about his future? Lattimore was asked about that, and he said he's not worried about whether or not he gets traded or not. He said, and I quote, "If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. If not, then I'm here." So I really don't get into it. I really don't feed into it, to be honest. I talked to DA already, and we're good. Everything else was just talk to me. I think Lattimore stated the obvious. And I said this last night when I put out that video about Marshon coming back to New Orleans for minicamp. Just because he's in minicamp and just because he's back in New Orleans and he's not beefing with everyone doesn't mean a trade won't happen, right? If someone came with the Saints with an offer they can't refuse, what are they going to do? You kind of have to accept it. That's the business of the NFL. But that offer has not presented itself, and the Saints aren't foolish enough to just trade away their best player for nothing. So here you are, where Lattimore's ready to work. He's going to do his job as a pro. And if an offer comes and the Saints have to listen, so be it. And if one doesn't come, that's fine. He's going to be your number one corner. Adebo is going to be your number two corner. And that is going to be the strength of the 2024 New Orleans Saints. So I love that they're taking this approach. It definitely helps the Saints, right? You don't have to worry about asset depreciation because Lattimore is not sitting here pouting and whining and complaining about what's next. He's just here to do his damn job. And what is his damn job? Being the best cornerback, not just for the Saints, but in the NFL. When Lattimore was asked today about him being healthy and the injuries that he overcame and where he sees himself, amongst his peers, he said, "I'm number one for sure. I want to prove that. I feel like I just started last year, all pro type of season. For me, I'm just ready to be better than that, than what I was," he said, "and I'm working towards that. I'm just ready." As a Saints fan, that's all you want to hear. That's all you want to ask for. Again, he's only 28 years old. He's still in the prime of his career. We're talking about a former defensive rookie of the year, a 4-time Pro Bowler, a guy that when is healthy and playing at the top of his game is, if you don't want to say he's the best, because obviously it's tough to say he's the best. There's a lot of good cornerbacks in this league. Marshon Lattimore's what? A top 5 corner when healthy? So this is great news for the Saints. I'm glad he's handling it professionally. I'm stoked that he talked about it with the media and was really open about it. And even DA. I mean, DA talked about it for today as well. He said Lattimore's never missed a mandatory minicamp, so I expected him to be here. Regarding his play, he said he'll reserve judgment until he gets to watch the tape. He wouldn't say anything stood out one way or another, but he's glad, and it's nice to have him there at camp. So, look, us Saints fans are accustomed to a constant shit show, the dramatics, everything. The whole 9 yards, we're accustomed to it as Saints fans. For once, you got a mandatory minicamp on a Tuesday where the storyline is there is no drama. And that's a relief. And that's nice to hear. So Lattimore is back in the building. Great news for us Saints fans. But he wasn't the only one back in the building for the Saints today. Alvin Kamara there for mandatory minicamp. What to say about Alvin that hasn't already been said? Obviously, we know what he brings to the field. We know what he is as a leader. But I think this season will go down as one of the more important years he's had in a long time. And it's for a plethora of reasons. But the starter is he's in a new offense. And for Alvin, one of the things I've said the last couple of years is, has he lost a step? Maybe a step or two. It comes with age and playing the running back position, which he was so good at for 5 years, where naturally going to be some drop-off. Like, that's just how it goes. But I don't think Kamara's drop-off was just, you dropped off because you got older and you've taken the hits. I think part of it was system usage, not having a clear vision. I think that changes now with Clint Kubiak. And this isn't to say that Alvin's going to go out there and be an all-pro running back and he's going to turn back the clock. No, I think we're going to get back, though, to having those plays where Alvin lights it up, where Alvin looks like the old number 41 of the past and makes a man miss in space and gets to show his receiving skills and gets to prove that he's still just a dual threat type of back. And we haven't gotten that the last couple of years. And what Alvin said today, in my opinion, shows that. So he was asked about this new offense and how it looks with Clint Kubiak, and this is what he had to say, and I think it's telling. He said the offense is very intentional. The run looks, the pass looks, protection, everything is intentional about this offense. That's what I'm looking forward to. You know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and when you're doing it. First off, ouch, Pete Carmichael. I feel like that kind of has to have some form of a shot in his direction. But for Alvin to go out there and talk about it, you can tell he's excited about it. And he is right. The one thing I said about Pete Carmichael the last couple of years, amongst a lot of shit talking that I've done on this mic, is say there was never any intent to establish something. Whether it was the run, whether it was the pass, the Saints never had an identity under Pete Carmichael. It's some days you had a good day and some days you didn't. It really felt like that whole sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit soccer bite that everyone knows. That's what it felt like watching the Saints under Pete Carmichael with that offense. And for Alvin to talk about how this offense has an intent for everything they do, it's important. And it's important for certain things to set things up. If Alvin and the run game is good, play action pass works, that makes Derek Carr's life easier, and so on and so forth. If the pass game's thriving, Alvin probably won't face as many stacked boxes. That helps out his situation. So it is just wonderful that Alvin's in this offense, because I think this is his best chance to have kind of a revival at this stage in his career. And I still think he's good enough to put up those numbers. Do I expect him to have a Christian McCaffrey year? Absolutely not. What CMC did last year was incredible. Offensive player of the year, now on the Madden cover. So congrats to him. He was sensational. But can Alvin be better than, 1,100 scrimmage yards this past season, 1,300 scrimmage yards the year before? I think he can. And I think he might need to, because Alvin is the one guy in this backfield that I trust without a doubt. I think Kendre Miller is super talented, guys. You guys know I think he's got talent. But we don't know yet, right? Like, the sample size is so small, and he's been hurt a couple of times already, so that's a concern. Jamal Williams was awfully disappointing last year, and I love his energy, and I think he's a great dude, but, all that matters for the Saints and every team in the league is, can you play well on Sundays? And Jamal didn't do that last year. So Alvin is the one guy who you feel like you can trust. And now you got him in a system that I think fits his skill set, and he believes it fits his skill set. And now you hope you just go to work and you make some magic happen. So I'm excited. I think that when Clint Kubiak becomes your offensive coordinator, this is one of the pieces that you think about when the fit happens. You're excited for Olave and Shaheed, obviously, because they're ascending talents. And, they played well in Carmichael's offense. They should play well in Clint Kubiak's offense. But for me, it was like, what is Alvin's role? How does he look in this? And what's Taysom's? Taysom, we know, has a new look. And boy, am I excited to see that play out. But man, wouldn't it be nice for Alvin to kind of turn back the clock a little bit, have like 1,500, 1,600 scrimmage yards, 12 touchdowns, and prove he's still that dude? Because the last couple of years, guys, we've heard a lot of crap about Alvin, mostly from the fantasy football players of the world. And look, I'm a fantasy football guy. I like fantasy football. But you cannot watch those Saints games and say, oh, Alvin's washed, that's why the production's bad. Has he lost a step? I'm going to say yes. But is he still really good and he was handcuffed by an anemic offense that didn't know whether it was coming or going? The answer is also yes. But that one you can fix. And that one the Saints have hopefully fixed with Clint Kubiak. So I'm really excited about Alvin in this new offense. I'm hoping it works wonders, and we'll have to see. But just having him there is awesome. And I tweeted it earlier today. When you see Alvin work, he's at a different speed from everyone else. Everyone else, it seems like it's 110% effort, and they got to move so hard and so fast to get to where they got to go. And Alvin just glides. It's effortless. It's something different. And again, this isn't me to be one of those kids that says you're glazing an athlete or whatever, because I think that phrase is just so freaking stupid. But something about Alvin is just effortless. It comes to him naturally. And hopefully this offense is one of those things. And I'm not worried that he missed OTAs. He said today I had a playbook. I had his iPad. He was studying. He did all his work. So he'll be ready. And him and Clint Kubiak have talked about having communications. And they got to be in communication and in constant contact, because I think he's going to play an instrumental role for this season. And it's nice to know that you won't have to worry about suspension or injury to start the year. Like, he'll be ready to go. And hopefully he'll get off to a hot start when they play Carolina week 1. So before I get into any comments that you guys may have, which, by the way, if you guys have any comments, predictions, questions about minicamp, thoughts, anything bugging you or anything you want to get off your chest, you can put it in the chat, and I will get to it right after I get through these final observations. So make sure you guys do that. And like I mentioned before, if you guys do enjoy our content here at Boot Crew Media, make sure to subscribe, but also smash the like button. Right now, that definitely helps out the channel, and we appreciate your support. So it wasn't just about Marshon. It wasn't just about Alvin. Those are the headliners, and rightfully so. I mean, those have been 2 fan favorites since 2017. But there were other observations to get to today. And one that I really want to get to that's very important is Chase Young. What's the latest on Chase Young? The Saints signed him. We were all excited. Then we found out that he has to get neck surgery, and then all that excitement got sucked out of the room immediately. It's like you popped the balloon, and all that fun was gone. So he talked to the media today. He said he's going to meet with Dr. Robert Watkins this week for a checkup. He said there's no definite timeline for his return, which obviously is not what you want to hear, but maybe you'll get one after that checkup. We'll see how that goes. But he said, I feel fine. I just ran 1050s. I'm getting back in shape, getting in the weight room, and I'm about to get strong again. So look, does that seem like kind of political jargon, I would say, like the politically correct answer you give to the media? Maybe, possibly. But it's got to work out for both parties. Like, I think there's this misconception that if Chase Young doesn't play, the Saints are screwed. If Chase Young doesn't play, Chase Young is also screwed, because Chase Young did sign with the Saints on a 1-year deal where there's a lot of needing to be on the active game day roster in order to get your money. Like, that's a situation for him where not a lot's guaranteed. He's got to go out there and prove that he's a playmaker at defensive end, that he can make a difference for the Saints. And from the Saints situation, obviously you want Chase Young out there. I mean, Chase Young, there are moments where you get frustrated, but boy, there are moments where you see that former number 2 pick, former defensive rookie of the year talent just fully on display. So I wish him the best. I hope we'll get an update this week after he's done with that checkup. I'd imagine we will. And we'll see how it all plays out. But Chase Young is going to be so important to this team too, whether he's in or out. If he's out, obviously that changes the outlook for things. If he's in, that's great for the Saints, because you have a guy across from Carl Granderson who can give you minutes. And obviously, you know that you're going to get snaps out of Isaiah Foskey now, because he's starting to ramp up. Had a really nice OTA session, carry that into minicamp today. He'll get his opportunities. Will he make the most of them? We'll find out on Sundays. But I'm excited to see what happens with Chase Young. And I can't stress it enough. I know there's going to be concern, but just understand, I don't think this is a situation where he can just kind of be lackadaisical about it. He's got to get back to 100%, because he's got to earn his money. And from the Saints' perspective, if it doesn't happen, you just walk away from the deal. So we'll see how this all transpires. But that's the latest on Chase Young. Has a meeting this week to get an update on his health, and then we'll go from there. But for now, no timeline, which isn't ideal. And I would say don't expect him for the start of training camp right now, but maybe things change. We'll see how it plays out. Keeping it on the theme of defense, Pete Werner balled out today, and boy, is that just a nice breath of fresh air for this Saints defense, because there are moments where the Saints defense played well last year, and part of it was playing bad quarterbacks. Part of it is Dennis Allen's just a really good defensive coach. Part of that's having, talented guys like Demario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu and Paulson Adebo doing their damn job. But what was maybe lost in the Saints' struggles at times last year was Pete Werner went from a guy that year one was kind of hurt, year two ascended into a really nice starting linebacker, year three really struggled. And Pete goes out today, looks really strong during the first team defense session, tackle against Alvin, tackle against Jamal Williams, just really looked like the starting linebacker we're accustomed to seeing. And it's just one day of practice, and you don't want to put a ton of stock into it, but Pete's got a chance here. And when you're in a positional battle, and he is in one with Willie Gay to be the starter opposite of Demario, there is that pride that comes into it. There is that desperation, and I think competition just breed out the best out of players. And for Pete's situation, not only is there the motivation of going up against someone else, and he'll go up against Willie Gay for that starting job, Pete Werner's at a point in his career where you got to play well to make that second contract, whether it's with New Orleans or not. Like, he's got to play well. And if he doesn't, that changes the outlook of your career. So, it's encouraging for me. I know when I put it out there and we talked about it on Twitter, some people didn't really care because, it's Pete Werner. Who gives a shit? If Pete Werner plays well and not everything in the world needs to be on Demario's shoulders, man, that's just great for this defense. So we'll see what happens. But that is something to me when I hear those and I see the reports and I see the footage after of what's going on in practice, and you just know that Pete finally looks like Pete from 2 years ago. To me, that puts a smile on my face because I think he can elevate the defense to the next level, and I think he is good enough of a player when he's on his game. He was bad last year, just flat out bad. But a chance for redemption and no better year for him to do it. And I would say for fans that are out on him, have a little patience because Paulson Adebo was great year one, struggled year two, and look how good he was last year. Adebo was awesome. Adebo's reached that point now where if he continues, he's going to get a massive payday. So let's practice that same beliefs and patience with Pete Werner, and let's see what happens. And if Willie Gay goes out there and wins the job, then so be it. Like, he earned the hell out of that job, and it's good competition. So I think there's no really lose-lose situation here. For the Saints, it's just benefits. And I think the linebacker room is something that could be slept on. I think it's a good position for the Saints. Now, before I get into any comments you guys have, the last thing I want to get to is Chris Olave. Still got the non-contact jersey on, but he's doing his thing. He's looked really sharp. And I'll talk about this in depth when we get closer to this conversation because I think we're still a ways away from this conversation. But Chris Olave's got a lot to play for this year. And by a lot, I mean, he's got a lot of money to play for this year. So Chris has looked like a good player, right? I mean, we're not surprised. Over 1,000 yards year one, over 1,100 year two. And this is despite, having quarterback injuries, not having a consistent offense. Like I said, using Pete Carmichael's offense, that's not ideal. For him, you go into year three now, better offensive coordinator in terms of scheme, you would like to think. At least more innovative with today's ideologies. Another year with Derek Carr under your belt. Your running mate in Rashid Shaheed should be better. Olave is at that point in his career where if he plays well and has the best season of his career, he's going to earn a shit ton of money. And if you don't believe me, just pay attention to Jalen Waddle's situation. Jalen Waddle goes out there, 1,000 yards year one, very similar to Chris Olave. He had way more catches than Olave, but 1,000 yards, pretty similar. Year two has over 1,300 yards, so better than Olave, but again, another over 1,000 yard season. And then year three, 1,000 yards, missed some time with injury, and he goes out and he gets, and this actually wasn't even that long ago, it was literally May 30th, he gets a 3-year, $84.75 million contract extension. So a little under $30 million a year. The money's out there for Chris. If Chris goes out there and balls out, Olave is going to get paid. So obviously the motivation to be great, and he talked about this last week on NFL Network about how he wants to be elite and put up elite numbers and be considered one of those top guys. That is something to strive for, and that is something he will strive for on a personal level. But if you're talking about just career-wise and his future and his family's future, he's got a lot to play for this year. So you do have that added bonus of, I want to be great. And I think Chris Olave could be a great player. I think he's a very good player right now. And I think if he gets better, he will ascend into that great category. And if he does that, he's going to get paid because this is a league that values wide receivers. If you are a great wide receiver in the NFL, you're the number one guy for your team, odds are you're going to get paid. Amon-Ra St. Brown got paid. I just mentioned Jalen Waddle. He got paid. Whether it's by the 49ers or not, Brandon Ayuk's going to get paid. Like, Jamar Chase is going to get his money. T. Higgins will get his money from someone, not named the Bengals, but from someone. It is that type of league. So Chris has a lot to play for. He's got millions of reasons to play for. And so far, he looks good. Add a little bit more muscle to his frame. I think that's going to be a benefit for him. And again, I want to throw it out there. Last year, he had a terrible offensive coordinator, and he wasn't on the same page with his quarterback for like the first 10 games of the year. Still had over 1,100 yards, still finished the season on a strong note. I think Chris can take that next step to being a great player. I really do. And I hope he does. So we'll see if that happens. Now, I'm going to get into any comments you guys have to wrap up the second half of this show. So if you guys have any more comments, questions, predictions, concerns, get them in there. And before I get to the first one, I just want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, Crystal.
I need to clear something up about New Orleans. While our culinary scene might be on fire, our food has never been about heat. It's always been about flavor. And this is how New Orleans does flavor. Are we clear? Crystal. How New Orleans does flavor.
Once again, thank you to Crystal for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to get into any questions, comments, fan Q&A, we like to call it, but it could be anything. It could be predictions. It could be, concerns, whatever the heck you want to put. We'll get to it. So let's start off. NOLA Gang podcast saying, who dat, Chris and fam. Jerry G saying, where are them trade rumors at now? Who dat? Love the energy. Jerry's been on the Lattimore's not going anywhere train for a long time. So this is a good day. This is a day of vindication for Jerry. And I definitely I salute you on that one. Rachel saying, I love seeing Chris. Love seeing you, Chris. That means football is close. Look, today is one of those days where you definitely feel like we're getting back there. We're getting back to it. I felt that way with OTAs because you start getting those video clips out there on social media and start seeing a couple of practice. But minicamp, when you see Alvin out there, you see Lattimore out there, it's got a little bit of a different vibe. You know that you're kicking it up a gear. 504 Co says, no way you trade Lattimore. We're making noise this year. Watch 12-5. We coming. Look, first off, I hope they go 12-5. And I've said, for me, there's some people that probably want to be validated, right? Like, they don't like Dennis Allen and they rather him stink and get validated off him having another bad year. I don't think Dennis Allen's a good coach. I've made that very clear, a million times in this, the history of this podcast and show. And I'm tired of saying it. But I'd rather he prove me wrong, be a great coach. The Saints win 12 games, they make the playoffs, than anything else. Because I want to watch the Saints win. Winning for the Saints is fun. That makes me have fun, makes me a lot more happy to be on here and talk about this team than if they're on a losing streak or if they're struggling or if they're just mediocre and irrelevant, which they've been the last 2-3 years. So that's what I want. I don't expect them to trade Lattimore. I think if an offer was going to be on their desk that they loved, it would have been there already. So it's not on the table. So I agree with you on that. It's 12-5. We'll see. But look, man, the Saints still have enough guys to be competitive. It's how well do they handle the start of the season? Because the start of the season is going to be brutal. And the end of the season, I think, is where they could really pick up steam. So you got to be able to kind of hold your ground, keep your head above water, and then you could start to swim. But you can't sink early. If you sink early, then obviously all hope is lost. One Smoke says, Kamara will have a better season than last year. I agree with you. I agree. Again, we can pull up the numbers for Alvin. So last year he had 694 rushing yards and he had 75 receptions. I don't need the receptions to be 75. A lot of those were like dump offs and he really didn't get a chance. It's maximizing the touches you get. I always used to joke with Alvin. I used to say he was like Charmin's toilet paper. Less is more with him. And I still feel that way. I feel like with Alvin, if you give him 15 to 18 quality touches, he's way more productive than if you just give him 25 touches because you're force feeding him because you don't know what to do with your offense. And I think you're going to get that with Kubiak as opposed to Pete Carmichael running it on 2nd and 10 with Alvin and it goes nowhere. Calvin says, I'm glad Marshon shut down those trade rumors. Yeah, man, I think that it's healthy for the Saints, and now it's one less distraction to worry about. So let's get this show on the road. Let's see what this team could do. Rose City D says, who dat, Chris? What's going on, man? P. Fowler says, who dat from this Evangeline Parish native now in Houston. Good show. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Rose City says, Pete got that heat on his back. Well, we'll see. Look, I will say he's one of those players that you are under pressure, right? Because you're playing for a new contract. You're playing for your job above all else, right? But I really do think, I can't It's hard for me to believe that Pete Werner struggled so much last year, and that's who he is as a player, when like the year before, he was a smart football player. He was making the right reads. He seemed to be a step ahead. It's just such a strong contrast between the two that I have to imagine there's still a really good football player in there, and we shall see what happens with him. But this is going to be a good competition. Willie Gay's a guy that had really good minutes when he was out there logging snaps for the Chiefs in a limited role. He wasn't a full-time starting linebacker for them, but when Willie Gay got his opportunities, he made the most out of them. And I like that the Saints brought him in there. He's going to give you more speed that I think Pete lacks, but Pete is, when they're at their best, I would say he's a better football player. Pete's not at his best, and we're hoping he gets back to that. So, yeah, there definitely is heat on his back. You're not wrong about that. Pablo says, do you think the new OC will have teams having a hard time preparing, given how predictable Pete was as an OC? I think it'll be better. Look, Pete Carmichael's offense was so predictable. And, I mean, I'm just going to go back to it real quick, the start of last season. Because the Saints had so many games where they were just anemic. Just go from the points, right? Week 1, 16 points. Week 2, 20 points. Week 3, 17 points. Week 4, 9 points. Then they have the explosion, right? 34 points. Great. Against the Patriots, though, who were terrible last year. They were picking number 3 for a reason. They stunk. Let me go to week 6, 13 points. Week 7, the Saints scored 24, but it's a little fraudulent. They scored 6 in the first half against the Jaguars, and then once they went to prevent, picked it up. Then they have the explosion of 38 points against the Colts. But then 24 against the Bears, kind of inconsistent. 19 against the Vikings, 15 against the Falcons. Like it was just too much inconsistency for the Saints last year with Pete Carmichael. And that's something they got to get better at. And I think Clint will, at least from having an identity standpoint, have the Saints on that track, which should make them more consistent. Because every good team in the NFL has their bread and butter. And the Saints on offense last year did not have that. Like saying Chris Olave makes a ridiculous catch, or Rashid Shaheed makes a ridiculous catch, or that's pretty much it. I mean, that's really all you got. Or Taysom made a couple of plays and put the team on his back for a couple of drives. Like, that is not an identity. It's not. Like, are you going to establish the run? Are you going to be better at that? Are you going to use the play action pass? Are you going to let motion kind of dictate your offense early on? Which Pete Carmichael, I mean, not until the Patriots game did he have motion. Like, you needed the reporters for the Saints to ask about them using motion for Pete Carmichael to go, all right, maybe we should try this. Like, that's not how it should go. So, yes, I do think that it'll be a little bit more difficult to prepare for Clint Kubiak's offense than it would be Pete Carmichael's. 504 Co says, what veteran wide receiver would you look at via trade or sign? I don't think the Saints are really in the trade market right now. As far as sign, let me take a look at who's still available. I know the one that everyone's obviously going to mention would probably be Hunter Renfrow, just because of his familiarity with the Saints quarterback in Derek Carr. But I think the Saints, I kind of like what they got in terms of youth with Olave, Shaheed, A.T. Perry, Bub Means. You added a guy in Cedric Wilson. So, they did a good job of acquiring talent. But looking out there, Hunter Renfrow, Russell Gage, I know worked out with the Saints today. I'll say Russell Gage is a name that intrigues me. He's got great NFC South experience, played with the Falcons for a good bit, then obviously played with the Buccaneers. The problem for Russell Gage has been the health for him, And honestly, the Buccaneers stint just did not go his way. But before he left for the Bucs, right, he was a really good receiver with the Falcons, had over 700 yards. I think he had close to 800 before he signed that contract. Had a decent 2022 year, and I'm probably being complimentary saying decent. It was really subpar for his standards, and then last year injured. So I'd be okay with the Saints going out to bring in Russell Gage. I'd imagine Saints fans would be okay with it, former LSU guy. So we'll see. I would say Russell Gage would be a name, since that is someone they've brought in. I would never discount the Hunter Renfrow stuff just because he's been mentioned so many times, and obviously the history there with Derek Carr. Jakeem Grant's been a guy that the Saints have been linked to. Don't know if they end up doing anything there. And then maybe a speedster and a Richie James, but I don't know, man. Richie James is so unreliable that I don't know if that's the guy that you go after. But I would steer clear. I don't think the Saints need to make a trade. I think they got their one and their two in Olave and Shaheed. If A.T. Perry gives you something to be confident about, awesome. If Cedric Wilson looks like a decent vet, good. Then you feel comfortable. But if not, Russell Gage, Hunter Renfrow, they'll be the two guys that I'd look at. Forgive said, would you be shocked if the Saints had 5+ Pro Bowlers this season? All right, let me think this out. Lattimore, Olave, Eric McCoy, DeMario, All right, so you need one more. I'm gonna say I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be surprised by like a significant margin. Because if they're healthy, then they could get to 5. But they got to be healthy. Because if you told me Alvin bounced back and Lattimore bounced back, that's 2 already. I think McCoy is in the prime of his career, so he'll be good to go. Lattimore, I mentioned it before, so that's your 3. DeMario seems like a shoe-in, that's your 4. And Olave, if he has a great year, that's your 5. So no, I wouldn't be surprised. Tyrann Mathieu still playing at a really high level. We'll see with Carl Granderson. Had a really good year last year. Can he take that next step? Feel the same way about Brian Brzee. So, no, I guess I would be a little surprised because that means everyone was healthy, and us Saints fans know that it usually doesn't turn out that way for them. But they got the guys to do it. And that's also why with the Saints, when I see them rated so low, I saw a mock draft today, they had them picking 3rd. I'm like, I don't see it. I just don't see them being the 3rd worst team in the league. They still have talent out there. So we'll see. But that's a fun one. I really appreciate that question because there is talent there. There is talent. And I think the Saints will be able to manufacture at least a couple of Pro Bowlers, Realistic stats for Chris would be around over 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns. AK bounced back with 12 touchdowns, I believe also. Yeah, I also think that look, AK's not going to go back to what he did in those years where it was just an absolute touchdown fest, which, again, you love what he did in 2020. You love what he did in 2018. But, touchdowns sometimes are anomalies. I mean, you could have a guy dominate a drive, and then they hand it off to their goal line back, and he kind of just steals a touchdown from his teammate, per se. So I'm not worried about that. I do agree, though. 12 just seems like a nice sweet spot for Alvin. As for Olave, I think that seems like a realistic number and a fair number that he could hit. But I wonder if he could take it up a notch, though, because he does have more experience with Carr now. I think Kubiak's offense will be better for him anyway. Can he get to 1350? You mentioned 1250. I think that is a very, very realistic stat line, and I think you're right. But can he go one notch higher? We'll see. I sure hope so. Selena says, you think Saints fans will be able to go to training camp at UCI? I hope so. I know they've been talking about, the logistics not working out for them and it being a hurdle, but I think it would be a real shame if the Saints don't have fans at training camp. Training camp is one of the best things about football, and I think it's so cool you got these guys grinding out at practice in front of the fans, putting their hard work in, and then having those moments after you get to interact and sign autographs and take pictures. And I don't know, there's something real cool about it. And, there isn't that pressure yet of the season and feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders. And it's awesome for the fans. So I hope so. Do I feel confident about it? No. But I hope that, logic prevails here and the Saints find a way to do the right thing. Pete Fowler says, I don't like Carr as a quarterback, but I feel like he'll have a better season. Do you feel the same? Maybe. Look, I think he'll have a more consistent season. I think that's what matters. And I said this a couple of weeks ago, and I really do mean it, because I do think Derek Carr gets a lot of unnecessary hate. I think he gets a lot of necessary criticism because he deserves a lot of it, but I think some of it's unnecessary sometimes. Derek Carr, from a statistical standpoint, had a good year last year, but he was not a good quarterback because the first 10 games of the year, inconsistent, had a lot of rough moments, and the last 5 games of the year, he was really good. And because of that, you look at his numbers, you go 25 touchdowns, 8 picks. You wouldn't take that? I would take that. And if he could replicate that this year again, awesome. But can you do it on a consistent basis? I'd rather have him go out there and give a touchdown or 2 a game as opposed to he's got 4 touchdowns in one game, no touchdowns in the next game, or he's got no picks this game, 2 picks the next game. Be consistent. And again, I don't think Derek Carr's a bad quarterback. I think there are times where he's bad, but I don't think he's a bad quarterback. But he's inconsistent. And I think there was too many times early last year where he struggled and his body language was off and his throws were just off and he wasn't playing strong in the pocket. And yeah, he played well when the Saints had weak competition and the season was pretty much over in terms of their playoff hopes. And that isn't to say it doesn't matter, because every game matters for these players. No one takes a day off or a game off in the NFL. But I just want him to be more consistent. And I do think he could be more consistent. I do think this offense is going to be the most beneficial to him out of any player, because the one thing your play caller is supposed to do is help out your quarterback. And I don't think Pete Carmichael did that enough last year. And I think Clint will with Derek. But do I think he will have a better season? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to agree with you because I think he could be more consistent. I thought he was so inconsistent last year. But he's got to prove it because that start of the season is not going to be easy. Calvin says, do you think we could win the South? Who dat? Yeah, I mean, look, I look, if I were to predict today, I would say the Saints are an 8-9, 9-8 team. That's how I feel about them. But can they win the South? Yeah, I think the Bucs are going to take I think the Bucs might take a huge step back. I really do. I think the Bucs might go 7-10, 6-11. I'll go 7-10. I think the Bucs are going to take a step back. The real question is, do the Falcons get magically better from Kirk Cousins? And yes, Kirk Cousins should make their offense better, but I thought their defense struggled at times last year, and they didn't do a lot to address their defense. And that's kind of been like swept under the rug because the cool thing is to talk about Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix and this quarterback room. And I get it. Quarterbacks are the guys that dominate the headlines, but defense matters in this league. And I don't think the Falcons have a good enough defense. So for that reason, I think the Saints will be competing for the NFC South. Do I think they're going to win it? I don't know. I can't tell you definitively today in June that I feel confident about it, but I would give them a 33% chance, just like I'd give the Bucs a 33% chance, and I would give the Falcons a 33% chance. And yeah, maybe it's stupid of me to kind of overlook the Panthers. I just don't think the Panthers are ready yet. I think they got a lot of work to do. But yeah, I think the Saints can absolutely win the NFC South. They just got to see if they can be consistent and do it. Forgive says, on the scale of 1 to 10, what is the chance you think the offense has the same problems or gets worse? Scale 1 to 10, what do I think that... Okay, let's see. That's a great question. You guys have all been asking great questions. I'm gonna go with a 3 or 4. Let's go 4 because the lower, the more you feel like it's, there's guarantees. There's no guarantees. I'm gonna go with a 4. I just don't think they'll have the same problems. I think that this offense is going to be different. I think they're going to actually try to put an emphasis on the early downs, and that's something Clint Kubiak's talked about. You're not playing to get to third down. You don't even want to get to third down. You want to take care of business on first and second down, and I think that's a good thing. That's something that Pete did not emphasize enough. And the Saints put themselves in third and longs, which didn't work out. And the Saints didn't have that identity on offense, which I think they will. So, and I mentioned it before, as for getting worse, the first 8 games of last season were brutal. That you had 2 good games during that stretch. So, I think they won't be worse. So I'm going to go 4 out of 10. And the reason I say 4 is because problems could prevail, be a problem, particularly offensive line play. And no matter how good you are as an offensive coordinator, if your offensive line ain't blocking, whether it's run or pass, life is tough. But I think at least for Clint, and if you look at what the Niners have done last year, and Clint's obviously coming through from San Francisco, the Niners don't have the best offensive line in the world. I mean, Trent's awesome. Aaron Banks is good, but Colton McKivitz is an average player. Spencer Buford is below average player. John Feliciano, they got a good year out of him, but he was an average to below average player before last year. So the Niners did a great job of valuing getting the ball out quick and being sure that their schemes are, offensive line friendly. The Saints should have that, which should make life a little bit easier for their O-line, but I could see the O-line being a problem. So that's why I'll leave it at 4 out of 10. But being worse, I just don't see it. I think that Clint's going to find a way to make them a little bit more exciting and a little bit more efficient. So we shall see. Again, it's only June. Minicamp just started today. We got a couple more days of this, which I'm excited about, and we'll obviously cover it here on the Straight Up Saints podcast. But I would say for now, cautiously optimistic. Do I think the Saints are a Super Bowl contender? Absolutely not. I don't even think they're an NFC contender. But the NFC South is not that good. They're relatively healthy right now. If you're ever going to be confident or feeling good, today's the day to do it. So that's going to wrap it up, guys, for this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I want to thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. Make sure, if you guys didn't already, to hit the like button. It definitely helps us out. And subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you get alerted for new videos. So thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it. We'll be back soon with more content here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.